one. So tonight, we're going to be looking at various techniques in archaeology. Now, it's over 8 weeks, and I've decided that it's going to go on for another 8 weeks because I have just realized that there is so much that we need to cover. And in fact, if you look at that, we're going to try and do a big chunk of this, okay? So today we're going to be looking at the whole introduction in brief to landscape archaeology. This is a module taught by the University of Leicester. So what I'm going to do, all of those of you who actually complete at least 7 of 8 of these, I will do a signed certificate for you afterwards. And what we're going to do at the end of every single session, every single Thursday, is give everybody an opportunity to say one thing. And I want to make it clear that, so if you want to say something about the lecture at the end, it's one thing, one question, one piece of information you want to impart. So those are basically the rules. So I think if I can keep to any kind of schedule, we're going to start off with this logo. Now, Menna, were you inspired to do archaeology because of Time Team?
No.
Oh, right, okay. That's not really a good start, is it?
Sorry. I mean, kind of, but...
Okay. Well, actually, Time Team was... came in after I really got interested in archaeology. But one thing that Time Team was good at was actually bringing all the elements of landscape archaeology to you. And all the words that we're going to mention for the rest of you who do love Time Team, I'm sure, will be familiar with the term geophysics. Geophysics was a term that nobody knew about in 1990. They didn't know about it in 1992, but by 1994, when Time Team was up and running, you heard about geophysics every week. You also heard about archaeological excavation, and you heard about research and aerial photography and maps and identifying pottery and so on. So that's why we started off with that logo to begin with. So I'd like to start off with approaches to landscape archaeology, and there's a lot more academia to this lecture than my usual lectures. So in this whole landscape of 8 classes, which will be a bit of a general introduction to the aspects of the history of landscape archaeology, and I aim to outline key techniques and methodological issues. And what we will do, this little bit today's, we'll look a little bit more about aerial photography than any other topic. But we'll be doing aerial photography again next week in a lot more detail. So what I intend to do is give you a general introductory, an overview of the role of modern intensive field survey and all the other allied techniques. Because in archaeology, we drag in geographers, we can even drag in astronomers to help us understand structures like Stonehenge. Archaeology is not just a single discipline anymore. And there are so many different specialists. Osteospecialists looking directly at bones. Ethnographical specialists looking at the artifact remains and putting them in some kind of order. And the list goes on and on and on. And when we think about archaeology, a good survey, a survey could be a word that covers field walking. If none of you know what that term field walking is, in 2 weeks' time, we'll be looking at field walking. A good survey is well planned. It's got clear and academic and attainable goals. So if you say, for example, say, right, I'm going to look at every single Roman site in Wales. It's not achievable unless you've got a lot of money, a lot of resources. But what is achievable is, say, looking at the area of Maesteg or looking at part of Hadrian's Wall. So all of these things have got to be achievable. One of the key mistakes that I made when I was in the University of Highlands and Islands, when I was doing my thesis, I had to give a presentation. And my own supervisor asked me a question. And I was basically looking at how archaeological sites work, how all the different rooms and doors and everything works, and access analysis, how people approach buildings. I basically said, oh yeah, I can do a whole a Brock site in Shetland and compare it with a big Roman villa site in England, and I can look at all these details. It's just not achievable. So I had to dumb down what I was doing because I didn't have a lot of time. One thing in archaeology is time. You need a lot of time to do things in archaeology. For example, Menna and Margaret are involved in the excavation project at Trellick. Now, there's no way is it possible to excavate the whole of the medieval remains at Trellick. It will never be done in a lifetime. In fact, excavating a single building at Trellick, looking at documents, aerial photography, all the artifacts, everything with it, is a lot of work. So you've got to be achievable in your aims. And then what you then do is you bring in a wide range of appropriate techniques to explore the archaeology environment of a study area, for example. So field walking should be accompanied wherever possible by the use of other techniques. I've learned from that one. Years ago, I was field walking in a field at Norton, which is by Ogmore Castle. And we found lots of pottery and lots of flint. And we didn't think anything of it. Only 2 years later, the National Museum of Wales had some aerial photography. And they had some other access to some technology that we didn't. And all those flints that we were finding were part of the first causewayed enclosure, Neolithic causewayed enclosure, to be found in southern Wales. And we had been field walking it with the flint. And we had found the site, but we didn't have the aerial photography to prove anything other than the flints that we were finding. So it's always good to have other experts and even have a bit of satellite remote sensing and sort of GPS. We didn't have any of that 20, 25 years ago. But there was aerial photography. Aerial photography has been around for a very long time. This is a very interesting photograph. If I asked you how this photograph was taken, you would, all of you, I'm sure, say that this aerial photograph of Stonehenge was taken using a plane. But this photograph was taken in 1906. This is a balloon photograph of Stonehenge. So when you think about aerial photography, don't just think about planes. You can think about drones now today and balloons and so on. And if you've got a long enough stick, okay, fair enough. Scaffolding, great. Aerial photography. And I mentioned geophysics as well. It was great to see geophysical survey on Time Team. Strange little devices, H-shaped instruments going across the landscape. Keep going, keep going. And you would have various different readings of things underground. And to be honest with you, the first geophysical images that Time Team was showing back in the 90s, nobody could understand the images except the experts. And now we do understand after 2.5 decades later, so much more about these little techniques that were being introduced by Time Team in the 1990s. And one of the things that we've done, for example, at Trellick, I said, we're going to do a bit of a sontage, basically a small hole in the ground, shovel testing. And we found a little bit more of a wall that went off in another direction. And one thing I'd like to stipulate is that archaeology is not just about archaeological excavation. It's about a lot more than that. It's about reading the landscape and having that great intercourse with the landscape, using those various mistresses of techniques. And then we look at surveying standing structures and earthworks. All can be seen using aerial photography as well, and on the ground actually. But not all earthworks on the ground can be seen with the naked eye. You need aerial photography. All areas of archaeology need a little bit of assistance. So there's so many techniques out there. And what we might do, I know full well we're not going to get through a scratch of it in 8 weeks. So this is why I'm saying there's going to be more. So the development of archaeology can go back many years, but I don't really want to look at all that early stuff. I want to look at how archaeologists come of age, particularly in the Victorian period, and then come to age itself into the modern day, using all these different interesting techniques. And this is field walking. Do you know what? I like field walking because it sets the women against the children, or the men against the boys. You know, I've been field walking, not to brag, and I've been in a field, and there's been a Roman bit of pottery about 3 or 4 meters away from me, and I can see it. Nobody else can see it, but I can see it. And then you get a big head in a field, like mine, Michelle. We went to Colchester. This was last year. And I said that there was, by an area that they had mapped out, that there was a theatre and a temple and all these other things. They'd put white lines in the soil. And next door to it was this field. And seeing a ploughed field to a group of archaeologists on an archaeological trip is fatal, because I can't keep the buggers out of it, because it's that inspiration that I've given you guys that have been with me for a long time, and some that have only been with us for a short time as well. And we went into that field, and I think Bill was with me. He found a bit of Roman pottery, and then I said, oh, wow, everybody, look at this. I found a bit of Roman Samian ware, only to be trumped by Rosamond, who had actually found a part of, it was pipe clay. It was part of a Roman figurine, a little pipe clay figurine. And I thought, oh, that's great. And then what happens is that Michelle shouts across the field, look what I've found. How embarrassing. She finds a bloody Roman coin. And it's like, you know, I find the Samian ware, somebody trumps that with a bit of Roman statue leg, and she finds a Roman coin. And then you realize that people can learn to be really good archaeologists with a little bit of tuition. Some people don't become good archaeologists in a lifetime, but it's very likely with a little bit of tuition, i.e. this course, you can earn a bit more. I know Margaret doing her pottery washing for us on a Sunday is a good exercise, because I get to see what the artifacts are before we take them home, and everybody else does. And Margaret learns a bit as well. you know what? Well, I actually pottery washed for 3 years in my summers and holidays when I was really young. And I was very grateful for that experience. It was a very useful exercise. So many people go into archaeology thinking that archaeology is just digging holes in the ground. I'm so pleased it's not just about digging holes in the ground. You know, Richard and I in Barry, we're writing a new history of Barry and Cadoxton. And we haven't dug any holes. But what we have found is we've identified some very interesting things in Barry, all by looking at documents. So that was a bit too much on field walking, but there you go. And look at this wonderful image. Wow. This is, I'm told, an image of Hadrian's Wall. But, and I'm hoping that is Hadrian's Wall in the north part. But if it's not, what you can see across this is unlikely it is, because there's no vallum or any banks and ditches across it. But this is associated with Hadrian's Wall. And like many understandings of archaeology, archaeology is layers, multi-layers, multifaceted layers of information. And what you can see here is not just a Roman landscape, is actually a medieval landscape with ridge and furrows. Just because in archaeology there's a name given to a landscape, i.e. Hadrian's Wall, this is a Roman landscape, you almost assume that there's just the Romans being there, nobody else. But in fact, it's a medieval landscape as well. And actually, before the Romans, people used the landscape in the prehistoric period. And actually, by looking at aerial photography, you can see so much more than you can see on the ground. If you go to Hadrian's Wall, you just see a bloody wall. That's it. Well, actually, that's not fair. But there's so much around there that's multifaceted. One of the things that I was very much into when I was doing my thesis was something I can actually read out for you. Do you know what? I haven't actually held my thesis for my master's thesis for a long time. Well, actually, when I say a long time, it's not been that long. But anyway, I'm going to read something out from here, but not yet. It's about that multifaceted landscape. And there it is, a geophysics, that H thing, sort of clunk, 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 clunk. And that's usually, I think in a time team initially, there was a big long lead, and then it was sort of, then it was by distance. And now that this type of technology is really evolved, it's really evolved over the years. So magnetometry, resistivity reading, and it's something that, again, archaeology is accessible to everyone if you study it. You know, Michelle's always said, why don't we get some geophysics equipment? And I just keep saying, well, if you've got a few £1,000, then we'll buy some. But then you need to learn about it, and then you need to go into it, and then you can become experts in your own right. Look at this. Some people will recognize this image. I used this in a very recent lecture. This is not in Britain at all. It's not in Europe. This is a banked and ditched enclosure in the Amazon basin. And there are earthworks upon earthworks upon earthworks being found across the Amazon basin. The Amazon basin is not to be classed as a virgin landscape. In fact, most of the Amazon basin has been farmed, replanted, cultivated over thousands and thousands of years. It's not a prime landscape. But what we're seeing with the removal of the trees, we're seeing lots of earthworks. Earthwork surveys. Earthwork surveys work good with aerial photography and geophysics and LiDAR. And earthwork surveys, when you do earthwork surveys, it's always good to know what you're looking at from above before you actually put your boots on the ground. These humps and bumps of the landscape that is all around us. There's archaeology under all of us. If there's not archaeology under all of us, there's geology. There's always something under the earth. There's always something to be understood and found. Even the street that you're in is part of an overall bigger landscape. Look at this. Do you know, it's so great, this document from, I think this is 1721. There's the one, like that one, 1721. And when you've got the ability to read documents and you've got access to documents, they are very useful, because lots of what you think happened in the landscape, when you look against documents in the past, might help you read that landscape. You know, we've got many historical events in history that if it wasn't for documentary evidence, we wouldn't know anything about. Interestingly enough, a good example, on the 14th of October in a certain year, a major event took place, 1066, the Battle of Hastings. If it wasn't for documentary evidence, the Battle of Hastings would never have existed. We've got no archaeological information for the Battle of Hastings at all. But we don't really know where the Battle of Hastings actually really took place. We don't really know. But it's because of documentary evidence that helps us understand the landscape associated with the Battle of Hastings. So it's not always about going out into a field. Do you know what? This is a little bit of a map. This is actually from 1762. Maps. Do you know what I'm going to do? I'm just a reminder. I might do a whole pottery identifying and pottery washing session. Haven't really worked out whether I'm going to do that yet or not, but I might do that. And what we might do is a map exercise. So I might be saying to you all, go on Amazon, order a map. But don't do it yet, because there's a specific maps that I want you to get. And it's reading maps. It's reading modern maps by looking at boundaries and modern maps. The cartographic evidence from modern maps, not just old maps, can help you understand the landscape. Place names, for example. Why is Swansea named Swansea? Why is Flatholm known as Flatholm? What's that about? Is there something in the place name? Of course there is. Why is Llaniltydvawr, Lantwit Major, called Llaniltydvawr? Why is that? Is it something to do with the saint? What does the land mean? You know, all these bits from maps. And I might do a map exercise for a whole hour, but I'm not sure how that's going to work online. And this itself is rather interesting, because Richard, our researcher for the book, the co-author for the book, he said to me, look at this. And I said, what are we looking at? And he said, well, let's do the annotation. He said, look at this road here. And I said, yeah. And he said, actually, that doesn't exist anymore. That was removed between 1762 and 1800. Because today, this whole area is now a golf course. And actually, there's a crematorium based on this bit. That doesn't exist anymore. Cartographical research, old maps, place names. Do you know what? Little roads that go off to nowhere. I love them. They just go off and they just end. Why? Little footpaths that go to the sea. Why? Where did they go? Was there a village there once? Good point, that. The missing village, south of the modern day village of Sully. Southley. There's a road going to it. There's nothing there now, but there was in the past. So it's looking at maps. Oh, archaeological excavation. The be-all and end-all of archaeology, but it's not. It's only part of archaeology. I think somebody said, I don't know if this is right, but I can remember vaguely in the back of my mind, archaeology is 10% excavation, 90% everything else. And I think that's probably right. If you're very lucky, you can excavate and do none of the field work. none of the other field work. Do you know what? The other field work is some of the most exciting stuff. Having a piece of Roman Samian on your desk, working out that that piece of Roman Samian ware comes from a certain factory in France, being that you are the second person after the excavator to hold it, all that type of stuff, all that research, 10% excavation, 90% everything else, all the other stuff that we're talking about. This is a excavation at Holborn Viaduct in London, 2011. Obviously, modern archaeology. You know, think about it; it's fairly modern. But then again, archaeology is about all those facets. Do you know what? The First World War, they're excavating First World War battlefields, and they're learning things that we knew nothing about: the history, nothing in the aerial photography, nothing about what people have said. And the point is that, you know, history, archaeology, there's so many different layers and tiers to it. Geomorphology, reading the landscape. You know, and the list goes on. There's so many more. There's so many more. But and looking at the relationship between, oh, I'm being showed some chips. Those chips, let them cool, job done. Thank you very much. You can't miss a good chip, can you? Geomorphography, looking at how the landscape has eroded naturally, how it's been affected by man, the interchange between man and the landscape, the geography, the geology, the rocks, and how it all works, how the landscape moved, so much more, so much more. And you know the biggest regrets? I used to like history in school, but then it got bloody boring. I didn't want to know about Mussolini and Adolf Hitler and Winston Churchill. I didn't want to know about Roosevelt. I actually wanted to know about history. That's what I thought was history. But in fact, when I look back on it, in fact, those bits of history from the Second World War are actually now becoming the archaeology. So it all comes into play. If you look a little bit of a slant, if you go off on a little bit of an avenue, you can see a bit of archaeology in it. You could see a bit of history and everything. It's like a little journey. It's always about a little journey. Landscape archaeology has a particular long tradition in British archaeology, in part because of a long-term association between archaeologists and geographers. We have got some of the best maps. We've got some of the best histories of maps anywhere on the planet. Okay, the French can argue that they've got good series of maps and a few other countries, but our cartographical service, the Ordnance Survey, has given us great data to be able to understand the landscape, the changes throughout the landscape. Okay, you can look at let's do Barry again, right? You look at a map of Barry, right? You can see an island and Barry and a little village that had a population of 80 people in it in 1850. Now Barry has a population of 50,000 people and Barry Island no longer exists because it's no longer an island, it's part of the mainland. Look at those two massive changes. But you can see them in maps. You don't need archaeology. You just need maps. Those maps, those changes. Barry Island was 2 islands once. Did you know that? But that's another lecture. The Ordnance Survey, founded by General William Roy. It was founded up for military reasons. You know, the Ordnance Survey felt that one of the things was that the British Army didn't have decent maps when they were fighting the Jacobites in Scotland. And it was thought that if they had decent maps, they could have beaten the Jacobites much sooner. And it was thought, right, if we had decent maps of the whole country, you know, we can change things. But for archaeologists and historians, they're golden. So General Roy, the founding father of the Ordnance Survey in the 1700s, an antiquarian and a geographer, that's clue. On maps, maps don't just show geography. They don't just show urban areas or roads on later train tracks. They actually show antiquities. They actually show Roman villas and hill forts. And I'm just going to interject a minute. Thank you very much, Roxy, for doing dinner. I'll eat it later, okay? Good. So maps themselves vehicles and depositories of archaeological data. All that stuff about place names, but they show sites. You know, there's archaeological sites marked on maps that have disappeared. And it's so, I love maps. Having a good old map on the wall, it's great. Field archaeology in Britain really began about this time, in the 1700s. And it began with this guy. Well, one of the guys. This chap is called John Aubry. He was born on the 12th of March, 1626, and died on the 7th of June, 1697. John Aubry was a man who surveyed our archaeological sites. This was a man alongside Stuckley who said, no, we should respect the likes of Stonehenge. We can't destroy these sites. We need history. We've got to preserve history. So in the 1700s, it was founding fathers like John Aubry that was actually saying that we've got a rich heritage. Let's do something about it. And then we've got another chap known as William Stuckley. William Stuckley, the significance about William Stuckley and John Aubry was that they saw the significance of mounds and ditches across the landscape. They saw these mounds and ditches that they could discern in grassland areas such as the chalk downs of Wessex in central southern England, modern day Wiltshire. Aubry and Stonehenge are the most famous of these sites that these people were bringing to us. People were starting to see, oh my God, what's that round thing with stones at Aubry? What is that about? And Aubry and Stuckley were saying, these are significant objects from our past. And even then, when they were looking at these sites, there were people with chisels and hammers breaking bits off Stonehenge. You could hire a hammer and a chisel from the local pub near Stonehenge and the pub in the heart of Aubry. But Stuckley and Aubry were saying, no, stop it. Stop what's going on. Stuckley, 1687, died in 1765. They were both contemporaries. And even though we see a great deal of the mounds and the monuments that they recorded now seemingly disappeared across the landscape, affected by the ravages of modern farming, the Wessex landscape is still covered by thousands of mounds that we now know were prehistoric burial mounds or barrows, together with innumerable settlements and ritual sites of different periods of antiquity, preserved as ditches, preserved as ditched and banked enclosures, field systems, and so on. And even if, interestingly enough, even if those mounds that these two individuals are no longer to be seen in the landscape, fly above them, you will use a bit of LiDAR, and you can still make out the outlines using that modern technology. Furthermore, many of these settlements were surrounded by systems of linear banks or ditches, marking out ancient fields. And so it was inevitable that British field archaeologists from a very early stage in the development of the subject began to concern themselves with landscapes as well as with sites. That is a very interesting sentence. And why? So I'm going to do that little bit again. Let's just read that little bit again. The development of the subject of archaeology began to concern themselves with landscape as well as with sites. Now, that's a really interesting one because people used to say, right, we've got Stonehenge there, we've got Hadrian's Wall, we've got the Merry Maidens of Cornwall, we've got Castlerig, we've got hill forts here and all the rest of it. And that's the way they used to look at it. But what people like Stuckley and Aubry were slowly doing was to put all these monuments on a map and to see their interrelationship. And it was the likes of Stuckley and Aubry that started to understand the Cursus monuments and the causewayed enclosures and the avenues associated with Aubry and Stonehenge. And then it placed these sites into the landscape, into that rich landscape of archaeology that we are all in love with. Otherwise, you wouldn't be doing this evening. Much of archaeology into the 1800s and then the 1900s is what we're looking at. This archaeology concerned with the construction of basic chronologies and sequences of past societies, the primary focus being excavation, only gradually a scientific enterprise concerned with stratigraphic observation and recording, and the study of excavated artifacts, all started to come together. All those complicated words started to develop archaeology into the scientific discipline that it is today. It was not really until the beginning of the 1900s that landscape archaeology became a recognizable approach against the traditional aspects of archaeology when we're looking at excavation and likewise. These chronologies, you know, people in the 1800s started putting things into chronologies like this. They started to think about words like the Mesolithic period, 10,000 years BC, the Bronze Age, 2,500 years BC, the Iron Age, 800 years BC, the Roman period, 43 AD. Started putting these things into chronologies and databases, and causewayed enclosures into the Neolithic period, and the likes of Stonehenge into the Bronze Age, and the likes of Maiden Castle into the Iron Age, and Hadrian's Wall into the Roman period. They needed to put these things into categories. And all of these things start to develop the interest in archaeology as we see it today. But, you know, whenever you look at chronologies, all the dates seem to be different on all of them. And I just wanted to put this in there as well. This development of the HS2 route, this shows the sites that they're going through. Burial grounds, various ditches, Roman towns, viaducts, all these things. And what HS2 is doing is actually cutting through the chronology of the landscape. This is what this is about. The next exciting thing we're going to look at is a little bit more about aerial photography. But before we do that, we've got to go to page 44 of my thesis for the University of Highlands and Islands. So listen to this. But I've got to introduce it. I'm very much in looking at the landscape as being something that's breathing as one. So you don't have a Roman site breathing by itself. You see what relationship that Roman site has to a medieval site, and then the relationship of that Roman site to the medieval period, and then the relationship of the medieval period to the modern period. Then you start again, and you see were any stones used from that Roman site in the medieval period, and how did people feel about these sites, and all that interaction. So hopefully this will be understood by all of you. Here we go. Just this paragraph here. And I see the landscape as space. The concept of space to the writer Ingold is an anathema. Ingold work tells us in four main notions. Landscape, importantly, is a paradigm of space or nature. It is not as such something that can readily be conceived. So in other words, it's very difficult to put things into categories. It's a very complex landscape. Landscape is living, and it's also non-living. So in other words, in the soil there's living things, but in the landscape there's also non-living things like stones. The landscape is complete, for every space is always filled. Nature contains and positively flows with us. It is our ally. Today we looked at Mesa Verde, and we basically said that man utilized the natural landscape that Mother Nature had created to build the great towns that we see within those overhangs in the Mesa Verde landscape. You are always fixed within the manner of the past. You can take the current into the past and onto the future. What I'm trying to say is that there are objects in the past that are so old that you can take them with us into our future, and they can be part of the future. On the surface, any living thing cannot be in more than one place at a time. If you see this as a bold containment, but the mind can travel anywhere. So an object, even though an object can't be in Australia, your mind can travel, your understanding can travel. And the writer Ingold as well. And that's a name you need to look up. I can tell you a little bit more about him at the end. Even movement has no fixed sense of space. For along any route, anything animate can see, think, and hear any point in time and locality, can understand the landscape. Consciousness has a dynamism that cannot be readily recorded as it is omnipresent. I love that word, omnipresent. It is not one-dimensional, but multiple. Everything is multiple dimensional. So when you see an artifact in the ground, it's a multiple dimension, because it's been moved and it's changed, it's altered, it's traveled. It's anything you find in the ground is like a time capsule, a time machine. And then we move along this line. We won't do any more about that. But here's a quote. There was a writer known as Mencius, writing over 2,000 years. And just a little quote from him. To dwell in the wide house of the world. And that's what archaeology is about. To be able to understand our past is to be able to understand who we are. Lots of people do archaeology because they are confused about themselves. They do archaeology because they want to understand themselves and where they've come from. You know, I'm quite proud to say that I've got a very strong gypsy heritage, but I didn't understand any of that before this journey, before I moved into archaeology. One of the greatest advances in British landscape archaeology was the development of aerial photography. Aerial photography already existed before archaeologists understood what aerial photography was. I didn't know I was going to be looking at this image in front of it. I didn't know I was going to be looking at Passchendaele, an aerial view of Passchendaele. This part of the active battlefield in Belgium in the First World War. And this image today, 100 years later, 100 years later, 104 years later, Passchendaele, 1916. This was before it was pounded to bits. If you looked at a modern map, some of this wouldn't be there today. This is how important aerial photographs are. Why have we got Stonehenge? A modern photograph of Stonehenge. So the First World War expanded our horizons because of those planes. We've got aerial views of Coventry by the Luftwaffe in the Second World War. The Luftwaffe bombed the hell out of Coventry. But it was because of those photographs that we were able to understand what Coventry once looked like. Bit of a dichotomy there. The main training area for wartime pilots was Salisbury Plain, where Stonehenge is located. And it was realized that viewing the landscape from the air revealed a huge amount about the archaeology buried beneath it. Oh God, every week I come across news headlines, something new found at Stonehenge or Aubry. Mind you, it may have been picked up in an aerial photograph taken in 1920. The archaeology underneath it, with sites being revealed by soil differences, differences in vegetation color, reflecting differences in vegetation growth, or by slight differences in topographical definition, throwing exaggerated shadows under low sunlight, or shadows under various other levels of light as well. And it was in 1929, so early, that they realized the importance of aerial photography to archaeology. Look at this. It's great, isn't it? Absolutely wow. 1906, an oblique aerial photograph of Stonehenge, 1906. There's not many cars on the road. And you think about the changes that have occurred to Stonehenge since 1906. Some of those standing stones were moved in the 1950s. Some of those standing stones were re-erected. So 50 years later, Stonehenge itself is different from this photograph. And all those subtle changes are very important to gauge. And I think this is a very important point. And I do know that I'm not going to get through everything I wanted to today, but we've got weeks to do this. Just because you see an aerial photograph of an archaeological site doesn't mean to say that archaeological site hasn't been mucked around with by the archaeologists or people moving stones and various other things. And it's always good to compare different aerial photographs. There was a book published by a guy by the name of O.G.S. Crawford and Alexander Keeler. Alexander Keeler, Aubry, that's where that name comes in. Wessex from the Air, 1928. Remains one of the classic studies in archaeological air photography. It's been reprinted many times. Wessex from the Air. Air photography has always remained a key technique for landscape archaeologists in Britain. Where in general, civilian flyers have had much easier access to airspace than in many parts of the world. The most regions of Britain are systematically searched by archaeological air photographs, many of them amateur photographs every year. And what we're saying is that we've been lucky in this country. We don't have areas like America where there's no fly zones. A regular basis every year where new archaeological sites are being found using aerial photography. Aerial photography, look at that there. It's a German craft flying over the Giza pyramids in Egypt. Look at it. If you compare that with a modern image of the landscape at Giza, there's, it's been encroached. But that image itself, I would say that image itself is probably from 1916, where there would have been German aircraft in the area associated with their Ottoman allies. Aerial photography is a vital component of landscape archaeology, now in all regions of the world, augmented, increasing by the use of satellite imagery. So in other words, augmented by the use of satellite imagery. So we're not just looking at what a plane can take images of or a balloon can take images of. There's satellite imagery. I'm sure all of us would agree that we've all looked at Google images. I use them every single week to show archaeological sites. Google is brilliant. Satellite images, I love it. Again, a little bit of this as well. It may seem odd, but we have whole trench networks that if they weren't photographed by the Germans or the Allies in the First World War, in some places we wouldn't even know they existed. Because after the First World War, the farmers were just allowed to take over the land and fill in the trenches. But it's the aerial photographs tell us where those trenches were. And we're so lucky to have that little bit of detail. Did you know, here's a little throwaway fact. There was Confederate and Union balloonists taking photographs of the trenches outside Richmond in the American Civil War. Aerial photography has been around since the early 1860s. Here he is. You can't make this name up. Osbert Guy Stanhope Crawford, born on the 28th of October, 1886, passing away on the 28th of November, 1957. A nice innings there. This was the guy who pioneered aerial photography. Aspects of archaeology, O.G.S. Crawford. Archaeology in Britain and beyond. We won't go to time team yet. Crawford was also a superb field archaeologist. So in other words, not only aerial photography, he matched the skills on the ground with the aerial photography, and the skills he developed in pioneering analysis of earthwork sites using techniques of ground observation and survey underpinned his classical works. One of them being aspects of archaeology and another one being archaeology in the field. Crawford, 1953. Crawford had been, strangely enough, an employee of the Ordnance Survey, and the fruits of their surveys of archaeological sites developed to a fine art by the Royal Commission for Ancient Historical Monuments in Wales, its division in Scotland and England. The Royal Commission, Toby Driver, he works for the Royal Commission for Ancient Historical Monuments in Wales. He's out there taking photographs of the landscape every year, and he comes up with loads of discoveries. The problems of monuments and maps, the fundamentals of field archaeology, are all intertwined. These techniques are variously discussed in very many publications. And then in the Second World War, there's a great revolution, not only in the field archaeology, but linking us in with physical and chemical sciences as well. Understanding the complex landscapes from a more scientific aspect, analyzing those soils and other facets of this great landscape. So we come back to time team. And again, lots of what I've been looking at today has come to us from what time team did, including sampling beer. But time team, when time team went, it was a catastrophe for many of us working in the field of archaeology, because it made us popular as archaeologists. You would give a lecture like this and you'd say geophysics. Everyone would know what geophysics meant. Aerial photography, they would know what aerial photography meant. They would also know, if you mentioned a bit of Roman pottery, they would have probably seen and been able to understand what a bit of Roman pottery was by looking at time team. So it was a great vehicle to help us understand, to give some meaning to the subject that we all love. There's an image here. It's of the highlands of our wonderful land of Wales. So let's get on to this issue. Another feature of the British landscape archaeology has been its close links with geographical and historical approaches to landscape development, as we've seen. One of the longest running themes through British landscape writing, for example, has been the concept of the differences between the upland and lowlands. What does that mean? Even though the topographical differences in Britain are far slighter and gentler than those of many regions, compare it with Norway, the position of the British Isles at the junction of the Atlantic and the continental weather systems makes for significant differences in weather. So if you're in Cornwall, you might be in the sun, and if you're in Wales, you're being rained upon all the time in the valleys. Different elevations make for a different, diverse landscape. A complex geology, sandstones, limestones. And even though this is a rather complicated landscape, there's great opportunity for reading the landscape alongside various levels and changes in settlement. developing the understanding of climatic changes across the landscape. There was an archaeologist who I've mentioned this week, actually, Cyril Fox. I think I mentioned him on Wednesday. Cyril Fox, he did a lot of work for the National Museum of Wales nearly 100 years ago now, was the first archaeologist to discuss the long-term relationships between the topographical and settlement history of Britain in the highland and lowland zones in his book, Personality of Britain, published in 1932. Many of his ideas have changed. Start again. Many of his ideas have been changed by later archaeological and historical research. But what he told us were the diverse changes between upland and lowland areas and how it worked, what that tells us, all that stuff of interchange and landscape. And a word that I will explain next week, taskscape, which to many of you, you may not have come across. There's a book that we had to read when I was in Leicester University. It was a book called The Making of the English Landscape by a writer known as Hoskins, W.G. Hoskins. See if we could, there it is. I've got a copy of this. This is the Bible to anyone wanting to learn about landscape archaeology from a historical archaeological point of view, you name it. Hoskins wasn't an archaeologist, but a historian. But much of what we can read of the landscape, archaeologists have found very useful. The necessity for archaeologists and historians to work closely together in the study of historical landscapes and the critical contribution of cartographic studies, in particular in unraveling the landscapes, is emphasized strongly in this work, The Making of the English Landscape by Hoskins. Get hold of a copy of this. You could probably get one of the many versions that have been reprinted over the years. I'm not going to be able to go as far as I wanted to tonight, but probably best not to rush things. This is KARL, and this is a site that was excavated by Graham Clark, the prehistorian. Let's do this. Lots of collaborations between archaeologists and geographers underpin the development of environmental archaeology. This is why we're showing KARL. KARL itself is a site that dates back not 5,000 years ago, 6, 7, 8,000 years ago. KARL. KARL is near Scarborough, and it was a site excavated in the 1930s. And the site of KARL, an environmental archaeological resource, helped Graham Clark understand the real prehistoric landscape. This site helped him reconstruct the prehistoric landscape. And then you've got examples in Cambridgeshire as well, at Flag Fen. And then over the years, it's not only reading individual sites, it's understanding the environment and the climate and all those changes. There he is, Graham Clark, in one of many of his lectures. And by understanding organic evidence like this, helps us understand how the landscape has changed. We've mentioned a great deal about what we see in the landscape today, but by environmentally making environmental samples of this type of landscape can really help us develop models to see what the landscape was like in the past. And then you put all these other techniques into it. Like these peat bogs. This was not always a peat bog. And again, it's that understanding the past helps us how to develop strategies for the future. So it makes archaeology very relevant. I should have said at the beginning, this lecture today was to make archaeology more relevant, to have it as part of our lives, to see all those little nuances that make archaeology interesting to all of us tonight. What I was going to do, I was going to basically, we'll do aerial photography proper next week, but we'll do a little bit for a moment. Aerial photography, we've mentioned aerial photography quite a lot tonight. And aerial photography is not just about nice little snaps of this Cardiff Castle. But even with this nice little snap of Cardiff Castle, you can see the walls around it. You can see the Motte Bailey in the centre and the relationship with the Motte Bailey and the walls. And then further south of this, the relationship of the Motte Bailey with the modern city, which would have once been a medieval town. And then the relationship of that area, the aerial photography, the outline of those walls is actually the outline of a Roman fort. And then the relationship with the River Taff. And isn't it great to be seeing aerial photographs like this and thinking, this is in the Yorkshire Worlds itself, and thinking, well, what does all this mean? What do these banks and ditches mean? Well, that next week. And what I would like to do is to give you a little snippet of what next week is about. Look at that. Ooh, lovely, sexy stuff. So, Roman structures spotted in aerial photographs of Wales. Now, this is dated June the 9th, 2020. So a year ago, the analysis of aerial photography taken in 2018 during a record drought has identified 200 ancient sites in Wales, which has been released now in 2020. Including at least 3 Roman forts, a marching camp, a Roman villa, previously unidentified sections of road, and there's his name, Toby Driver. Works for the Royal Commission on Ancient Historical Monuments. And he goes on to say, the sites give a glimpse of Rome's military might during the 20-year fight to conquer the Celtic tribes in the region. Well, sometimes disagree with that statement, but anyway, this is when Wales is still a very dangerous place to be for the troops. They are still under attack. Again, it's not something I agree with. One of the forts located to the west of the Roman town of Caerwent, the Roman legionary fortress at Caerleon, had an inner and an outer defensive structure. This was only found in 2018, revealed in 2020. The zone in between would have allowed Roman soldiers to attack the enemy with javelins. The Roman marching camp, the third to be identified in Wales, served as a temporary overnight stop with defensive positions and kitchens for troops travelling through hostile territory. Once the fighting was over, Toby Driver tells us, the camps were dismantled. It's the scale of the control of Wales which is exciting to see. And in 2018, we found more of it. So this is what we're going to do next week. This is a site known as Dyn Llygwy on Anglesey, the Roman and the prehistoric landscape. And look at that. That's one of the Roman forts, camps that they were talking about. Look at the outlines of the defenses, the grid pattern, the road that goes through the center. But that is as far as we're going to go tonight. Do you know what, Mena? I haven't used you once this evening, have I? But Mena, you bring some points to, everyone else has got one question. But as you might be joining me over the next few weeks doing part of this course with me, is there anything you'd like to say tonight?
Not really at the moment.
Okay, that's fine. That's fine. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to end the image there now. This is available in the foyer as well. So this will be placed online. So I know that wonderful, beautiful Ellen has probably missed a bit of this tonight. So what I'm going to do, everyone put their mics on. And if I could have a word with Jess and Mena at the end, I'd be very grateful. So Margaret, here we go. Margaret,
hello.
you were the one looking forward to this course tonight. Has it been below expectations, or has this been what you expected?
It wasn't exactly what I've expected.
Fair enough.
But it's certainly given a real overview of, like they say, you're not just digging a hole. There's lots of other parts to it to join together.
You will love the field walking one. Go on.
Yeah, each little bit is a little part of the story, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly. So what did you expect from tonight, Margaret? I'm only going to pick on you with this one.
I don't really know, Carl, but it's I mean, I know nothing whatsoever about archaeology, so you know, anything's going to be learning, if you see what I mean.
I agree with that sentiment. Okay, Anne, you've got one sentence.
I had a sentence and I can't remember it.
Okay, then.
No.
What about you, Jess?
I thought it was quite interesting. It was definitely better than what I thought it was going to be. I just like the whole thing about maps. I do like a cheeky map myself. I've been looking at the maps of Cardiff, like you mentioned. So when you mentioned that, I was like, ooh, got a little bit excited.
Maps do excite me. A map is as good as being with a good woman. Isn't that right, Bill? What would you like to say?
Well, talking about women, Carl, I just got one rather cryptic question, which I think you'll understand. And from what you said earlier, in 2 weeks' time, will I have a chance of meeting a merry maiden?
I tell you what, it'll definitely turn you to stone, Bill.
Okay, fine. I thought so. You can confirm my suspicion.
What about you, Pamela?
It's a simple one, really, and I don't know why I didn't think of it before. Seeing the balloon photograph, 1906, actually shows the henge around Stonehenge. And I never thought of that before. So you've got the stones in the middle and the henge around the outside. But they put a roadway through it, and that made me a bit cross, but that was all those years ago.
Exactly. There are changes. Everything when you think about archaeology. So have we got the road there? You can see it quite close. Yeah, exactly.
No, it is here. Oh, 1 minute. It was round about here. It came right across, straight through the henge.
I know the one you're talking about. Exactly.
I don't know what road it is.
I just got my paperwork on there. Exactly.
Yeah.
Right. What about you, Ellen? Anything you'd like to say? Was it worth joining us tonight, Ellen?
It exceeded expectations. Apologies for everybody who's been in that road. I had to and look what I found. Befo in my garden.
Oh, a female bufo.
It is female. She was large, and it was under the woodshed. And when you look it up, it says they always go under log piles. Typical. But tonight's lecture was fab. It actually really brought alive everything that's just going. You can stand on any square yard of Britain, and millions of things have gone on in the past. And Carl, it was riveting. Thank you. It was absolutely superb. I can't wait for next week.
That's what I want to hear. Basically, I decided months ago that I was never going to ask how people felt about a lecture, but because this was the first one tonight, I thought I'd give it a go. And obviously, I need to know if I'm on the right patter. So obviously, I am. I think that is everybody said something. So if Jess and Mena stay behind for a couple of minutes, but if anyone wants to say anything else, they need to shout her out now. Sorry, Anne, you forgot your question, but you'll have to text it to me.
Well, I think you know, I've been through a lot. I've been on your courses, and I found this one. I like the way you've introduced it, and you know, the imagery you've used, like the artifacts, you know, being part of, being dynamic, you know, and not sort of set, that they open up a whole lot of inspiration and imagination, you know. So as an artist, that really got, you know, I really understood that.
Fabulous, fabulous. On that note, guys, Anne had the last word, and I'm proud that she didn't mention washing machines once. So what I'm going to do, Bill, I will see you next week, and Pam, I will see you next week, and Anne and Ellen. We'll have a quick chat with Jess and Manna. Other than that, I'm going to say good night to you all. Really appreciate you all. Everyone's turned up tonight, so it's great. Everyone. I really appreciate that. So we'll do next week, and next week will be aerial photography, identifying how the earth works by looking at aerial photographs and various things on the landscape. So that's what we're doing next week. And Margaret, I will see you on Sunday as well. So thank you very much.
Yes, bye.
Night, Bill, Anne, John, Pam,
Take
Jess,
care.
Ellen, and Manna. Night.
See you next week. See you soon.
See you soon. My pleasure. My pleasure. Right. Well, just have a quick chat. Okay. Right. See you, Bill. So I'm going to. We'll stop recording. Stop.